Good evening. It's time to call to order the Guthrie Public Schools Board of Education regular monthly meeting, March 11th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Davis. Present. Watts.
Present.
Smedley.
Here.
Pearson.
Present.
Flagg.
Here.
Bennett Johnson.
Here.
Salee.
Here.
Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we begin this meeting, let us pause for a moment of silence. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 6, presentation by Mr. Brian Billings from Sonic of East Guthrie.
This is an annual event, and we always welcome Mr. Billings to the board meeting. He has a presentation for one of our school sites.
Hello, everyone. We've done 7 years of everybody getting, each school getting a $7,000 check. We get to start all over again. There've been another 7 years. It seems like the first 7 went pretty quick, and hopefully this one will be just as quick. To the Guthrie Junior High, $7,000 donation. Good shot. Awesome. Thank you. Oh, good. Congratulations. Awesome. We'll be doing it again next year. Don't forget that for teacher appreciation, we'll get all the drinks for the teachers this year. Fax us in whatever drinks you want. Bring it in. Fax your drinks in. Go to. Fax them in. We'll get you fixed up. We appreciate everything you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brian, we really sincerely thank you for your support and really appreciate all you do, because we know, most of us know that you do so much more than even this, and it's truly appreciated by everybody in the district. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item 7 is the student recognition.
Mr. Whimsy from Foundation Insurance is here tonight to have a Student of the Month recognition.
Guys, I'm Blake Whimsy with Foundation Insurance, and I'm here to help honor our March Guthrie Public School Student of the Month, which is Mr. Jesse Cepeda. Did I say that right?
That's right.
Okay. And I usually read to you guys the application, but this month I'm going to let Ms. Sawyer go ahead and read what she wrote in honor of Jesse. And so,
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to try not to cry here. Jesse is a one-of-a-kind student that many of us do not get the opportunity to even meet in our lifetime, let alone get to work with. Jesse is a senior and attends school at Guthrie Upper Elementary. At first glance, to see Jesse is to see a young man in a wheelchair that does not use speech to communicate his wants and needs. However, Jesse has a way of communicating with his eyes, facial expressions, award-winning smile, and he is even learning to use a speech device. At second glance, you can see that Jesse has a greater challenge with movement of his muscles because they don't always work the way that they were intended to. He can see that his muscles work differently, so he is always willing to find a workaround or another avenue to get things done. However, it's at third glance that you can really see the true Jesse. He is a young man that waits patiently on others around him to help meet his basic needs. He never gets angry, he never gets agitated, and he is never impatient. Never. He understands that his abilities are oftentimes limited, but he recognizes that there are others around him that need even more help than he does. In addition to his patience, Jesse has the greatest determination of any individual I have ever met. He is always willing to try his absolute best at whatever challenge he faces. Jesse has been recently entering a regular education classroom in the afternoon, and he teaches his peers more than they teach him. He's teaching them how to be patient, how to work hard, and how to be self-determined. It is with a joy that I get to present, or we get to present Jesse as the Student of the Month for this year, or for this month. And I want to especially recognize his mom and his sister who do an amazing job with making sure he has everything that's needed for him in the daily classroom. So, congratulations, Jesse.
For the nomination, that's a pretty special one. And I know you nominated him for patience, but I heard a lot of those keywords in there that we're looking for. So good job, Jesse, on being Student of the Month. And we have a $60 gift card to Walmart this month instead of Stacy's Place. So make mom buy you something fun, okay? All right, that's for you guys, okay?
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for the nomination.
Right up there, Chris.
Ready? Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So agenda item 8 is comments to the board by citizens registered to speak to the board.
We have none.
Any comments by board members to the board? No? Okay, agenda item 9 is the superintendent's report.
Tonight, we will, or since our last board meeting, the state report cards have been released. We have that as an agenda item, and I'll reserve my comments for the report card for that agenda item. We've had an additional 3 inclement weather days since our last board meeting. Because of the hours built into our schedule, we will not have to add days to the end of our instructional calendar at this time. But we're getting close, so winter needs to end for a lot of reasons. Yeah. Students from Mrs. Pratt's Gifted and Talented program at Guthrie Upper Elementary School participated in the Oklahoma Inventors Exposition. Placing first was Noah Trask with the 6th grade competition with the Retainer Bright. The 3rd place winner in the 5th grade competition was Jace Rainwater with a miniature microwave for a lunchbox. No word on whether or not Dad is using that. Molly Throckmorton received honorable mention in the adjustable dog halter. Other good news, our Guthrie High School wrestling team was the 5A academic state champions with a 3.63 GPA. They were honored at the state wrestling championship and also honored at the state capitol on the floor of the House and the Senate by Representative Mize and by Senator Hall. The next item, public forums for the upcoming bond election will be held on Tuesday, March 26th at the Community Church and Thursday, March 28th at the Logan County Fairgrounds Education Building. Both forums will begin at 6:30 and they are sponsored by the Guthrie Chamber of Commerce. And the final item, thoughts and prayers go out to Kanawha Public Schools as they lost a student over the weekend in a bus accident. I am personal friends with their superintendent. I reached out on behalf of Guthrie Public Schools that day and offered our condolences and also offered any assistance we could provide and said, unfortunately, we've been through some of that. And so just keep Kanawha in your prayers. And that's my report for the evening.
Thank you, Dr. Simpson. Agenda item 10 is the presentation of the 2017 to 2018 site report cards by Ms. Carmen Walters, Executive Director of Federal Programs and Elementary Education, and Mr. Doug Ogle, Assistant Superintendent.
good evening. Get a chance tonight to present our site report cards. The first thing that I would like to say is several of the administrators in front of me had a chance this summer and this fall to go to several workshops that the State Department put on to learn how to figure these report cards. So if you see a few of their faces, and a little bit of frustration was that the report card changed from some of these presentations that we went to, how to figure the report card. One of the big issues was the State Department went to a bell curve, and so there was automatically going to be so many A's and so many F's, and that was never told to us when we went to any of the workshops. And so anyway, I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that going forward. So Guthrie High School report card. There's several indicators that are similar towards sites, but for the high school, there's some that are particular, and so we'll go over these. First indicator is academic achievement. This is the ACT that the students take for their standardized test. And so as a school, you can see that we were 48%. The state was at 52%. If you look at our 5A averages, we were right there, and that equation broke down to a C. If you look at the English language proficiency progress, this is something with our ELL students. We did a really good job of growing those. Students, we spent a lot of money that's come from the federal government to help that, and Mr. LeGrand and his staff have done a great job of gaining some momentum with those students and received a B in that. The one that we've heard a lot about is graduation, and so I want to talk a lot about that. We did receive an F. We had 73% of our students in the cohort group that graduated in 4 or 5 years. The cohort group is the group that after they finish 8th grade year, they become a group and they have to graduate in that 4 or 5 years. There's only 3 ways you can get out of the cohort group. 1 is be deceased, 2 be incarcerated, or 3 transfer to another accredited university or public school. And so we look back at the last 10 years of data, and our cohort graduation rate has been right at 79 to 80%, which if you look, and 80% is a D. And so a lot of people looked at the graduation rate and said, we have an F. Well, 73% of our kids in that cohort graduated in the 4 years or that extra year if some of those needed it. If you remember back to the fall, if we can get them as seniors, 96% of our seniors that start in August graduate on time. And so it's a little misleading there with that graduation rate. We do know there's some work that needs to be done. And so Mr. LeGrand and his administrative staff and his leadership team, I know they're going to be meeting and trying to figure a way to get these kids to graduate and get that cohort rate up a little bit. One of the issues that we found is there's a large number of homeschool kids in this graduation that don't meet that 3 criteria that we talked about. And so when they're homeschooled after they leave the junior high, anytime during that senior year, they're considered dropouts. And so something we know that we need to address and need to work on, but we did want to highlight some of the things that came on that graduation portion. Chronic absenteeism. The high school was 84%. As you can see, this is a D. This is part of the frustrations, as you can probably look at some of their faces. This was one that when we went, it was calculated if you had an 84%, it was going to be 8.4 points out of 10. To get to the bell curve, they moved that and had a formula, and so the chronic absenteeism is D. I'm not going to get into the formula part of it, but something that we do need to work on. The report card from 2 years ago used to use our average daily membership. Now chronic absenteeism is figured that every kid has to be in school 90% of the time throughout the whole school year. So basically they can miss 18 times. Is that correct? Yeah. And on that 19th they become chronic absenteeism student. So we have looked at what some of the other schools that are doing that are in our class of 5A, found some ideas and maybe some coding ways that we may be able to address some of this. But at the same time, we urge our parents to help us and get our kids to school because it does help us on our report card. Post-secondary opportunities, another indicator. We had 38% of our juniors and seniors that participated in either concurrent classes, AP classes, or certification classes. And so I think that's a pretty high number. We had, looking at some other schools, we had some schools that were comparable to us, that were even college towns that had a D, had less than that. So we're still going to encourage and look for other opportunities to help our students to meet that. But I think 38% of those juniors and seniors getting those post-secondary opportunities is pretty good. But we'll continue to look for ways to grow those opportunities. An overall grade was a C. When we looked at, you'll see the comparisons after I do the junior high of the high school and the junior high 5A comps, is we're right there in the middle. One thing that I hate is, I hate that our students, because of the bell curve, this report card could have been altered a little bit, especially some of the indicators that we have. So, any questions over the high school before I move to the junior high?
Back on the absenteeism, the chronic absenteeism, you said 18 absences. Is that unexcused absences?
Any absence.
Any absence.
Yeah,
even if it,
activity.
except a school activity.
That's right.
Okay. Any school activity. It doesn't have to be a state or national level.
No,
Okay.
school activities don't.
And there is a report that we can, if there's any type of medical exemption, that's a new thing that they did add. So if we have a kid that's maybe out for some type of chronic illness, we can go in and fill in that report. That's a new report that they have started this year. Good question.
So the absenteeism, how much is it tardy? Is that a big component of this, or is it just?
3 tardies
Truly
equal an
absent.
absence. Is
So
that
how much?
of it? No, we don't do that. Okay.
No, we don't do that.
For this reason.
For that reason right there.
With a lot.
Well, it used to be 3 tardies equals an absence, so
Okay.
I don't want to get those tardies to equal a kid's absence if it's going to be held against them.
Okay, so, very interesting.
We still give them discipline and consequences for tardies, but we just don't count it as an absence.
Yeah, so 18 absences, they missed the entire day. They missed the entire day if they were absent then. All right, so what if they miss first hour? And then they show up for second hour?
It's
that
a
still a-
percentage of the day, is what they pull it from the student database, and I think it has to be more than 4 periods a day to be considered an absence for the day
Okay.
out of the 7. So just first hour is not going to count against them.
Okay.
Good
Thank you.
questions. Anything else for the high school? The junior high. The indicators are a little bit different. There's some that are similar. Academic achievement from the fall, when we talked to Mr. Rainwater, his administrative staff, and his teachers, they were above the state average, or at the state above average in every subject. They received a 65%, and you can see the state average was a 52%, and that was a B. You know, to me, if you're above the state average in all those and you're just getting a B and we're way above it, there's a little bit of issues. I know Robbie will argue that one too and say that when we start looking at some of the other schools, we were above them in all these categories and their score was a little bit better. And so that's some of the questions that we have asked to try to figure out. But then it goes back to that bell curve, is they only want so many A's, they only want so many F's, and so we're all kind of clumped in there in the middle. You'll see that there's no grade for the English language proficiency progress with the junior high. They did not have enough students that met that criteria, and so they will not receive a grade. So out of a 90-point scale, they go to a 75-point scale. Academic growth was a C. Another issue that we have that we've asked our accreditation officer for, it's a little explanation, is we were at 60%, as you can see, as a school, and the state was at 50%. So we're above the state average, and we're getting a C. And so frustrated may not be the right word to say, but you know, it's one of the things that we're looking at. We're going to try to figure out exactly, you know, some of those kids and how they're figuring that. And so I'm not going to get into that too much, but to have a C on that. Chronic absenteeism, you can see that the junior high was at 88%. State average was at 87%. So again, we're above the state average, but we get a C. And so a little frustrating that when you're above the state average and you still get a C, and 88% of our kids come to class on time.
Doug,
Yes.
the thing that sticks out when you compare the high school and the junior high, obviously, is academic achievement. That's the one there's a big gap there. Why is that? What do you attribute that to?
Well, some of that is the high school now is ACT, and so it's a national test. Some of that is they're not getting tested now at the high school level until they're juniors, so they're not getting tested now as freshmen and sophomore. And to be honest, I think the system that the junior high Mr. Rainwater's put in has been very successful. They have figured a way that what they do works. And I think Mr. LeGrand and his staff now are trying to figure out what we can do to help that with the ACT. Is we've already talked about how can we have an ACT prep class? What can we do to make that work? Because we know that now that's their grade, that's their report card. And so we're looking at how can we make that part of their curriculum maybe. And so those are some of the talks that we've already started having. Is we think those kids need that. I know my stepson, we had to pay out of our pocket to send to ACT prep class. And so, those are things that we're looking at. Does that kind of help, Ron?
There's another element to that as well. Keep in mind that the junior high has 2 years where they are not issuing credit. And so it's not as if they're having to the low-level students are having to, per se, retake classes. But when that turns to that 9th grade year, you have 4 years to graduate, and the students that are of the lowest level are not, if they're not getting those credits, that piles up and has a sort of a snowball effect on that student population too. And so that's why it's hard to measure those apples to apples because of that condition.
One thing too I want to point out is that the ACT is a time test, and up until this point, they've been given unlimited time. All the tests that they take in elementary and at the junior high are untimed. And so that's one reason that we're giving the sophomores the pre-ACT, just so they can be exposed. Of course, we encourage them to take the ACT more than one time. And it's like anything, the more you practice, the better you become. But unfortunately, a lot of our students, the first time they ever see the ACT is their junior year when it's offered for free by the state. And I understand that, but part of that is we're trying to have our teachers give time tests so that the students are accustomed to that, because through elementary, junior high, it's unlimited. But the ACT is actually, like the math, is 60 questions in 60 minutes. And some of them just aren't accustomed to that, unfortunately.
So is this academic achievement at the high school, is that based just on the junior ACT, or is
Yes, ma'am.
So majority of the times, that's their first time to take it. Mm-hmm. Does it change if they take it again as a senior and they raise their score?
Well, it doesn't affect this.
It doesn't affect this. So this is based solely on juniors taking the ACT?
That's correct.
And the important component there is if they haven't gotten an upper level science, if they haven't achieved an upper level science and math credit, it's very hard to have a good score on the ACT. And that was kind of to what I was alluding to with yours.
So if academic achievement's based on just the ACT score,
Yeah, and
so how does that discourage the district from? I think we ought to encourage students to take the college path, the ACT path, or career tech. So it seems like there would be an incentive not to push kids into the career tech if you're measuring your academic performance based on the ACT. So how do you compare our student body population with maybe an Edmond or
Yeah, I mean, we obviously don't have as many that are on that realistically are going to college. I mean, if you ask are you going to college? 80% of them will tell you they're going to college, but when push comes to shove and you look at the data, it's closer to 30%. So that's just not, I mean, our clientele's more to the career paths, which is fine. I mean,
So nearly half, well, over a third of our grade is tied to the ACT, which is not a career tech type path. So on the one hand, you want to encourage your students to pursue a career tech path if they don't go to college, but then on the other hand, we may be penalized on our academic achievement.
Yeah, that's true.
It's interesting.
And that ACT, and if you remember back from the fall, I think it's important to point out that that's based on the benchmark that ACT, in order to be successful in college, they want you to reach this certain benchmark on the ACT. And so that's why they're coming up with those numbers, is the number of students that have met or above those benchmark levels.
As I dove into this, the thing that stuck out to me the most was the academic achievement grade. You know, I've said, and you guys have heard me say this every year since the report card started, that it's a great measure of socioeconomic status of your student population. That's most visible in the academic achievement. And when you look and compare that segment of this report card among other schools, it's very obvious. And it's, I think it goes back to, it's hard to take that out and say you're going to have a report card and not have that element of socioeconomic status of your student population in there.
What is the junior high's academic achievement based on?
Their state tests. ELA, science, and math. And they don't do history or anything, just those three.
And that's just in 8th grade?
7th and 8th.
7th and
8th grade science, not 7th grade science.
Okay.
Doug, what's the first opportunity that these kids who reach the 9th grade have exposure to the thought process being put in their minds to take the ACT? I mean, I know we're talking about maybe having prep classes, but when does the seeds get planted?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have an answer for that. I can tell you that starting next year, the ICAP is getting ready to be out, and we'll have a board conversation about that. That's a new state initiative to get kids college and career ready, whether that is at a career tech or on the college, and get those conversations started early. And so that's going to be a component of that ICAP. But to say a specific time when we start talking about that, I can't answer that one.
You know, you might mention too that the ACT Explorer has been part of that 8th grade for years, last couple of years we got away from it. We took it again this year. Those kids get a breakdown of what they missed and how they would score in comparison to what they're going to score. And when they take the ACT, it does an interest inventory for them. So that's talked about through the guidance counseling and taking that ACT Explorer at the junior high level.
So who at the State Department, which I assume that's where this all comes from, comes up with this, how's that figured? Who comes up with these brainstorm ideas like the bell curve?
Can you answer that, please? They have a lot of smart people that were not in the school business, but in the mathematical work to get that bell curve to come through that way. Before I flip the slide here, I just wanted to point out that you can see that we were above the state average in all these categories. And so when you go to the overall junior high grade, where 61% the state was a 55, and that's a C. And so I'm not going to turn around and look at Mr. Rainwater because I know he's got steam coming out of his ears. He missed a B by 0.4 of a point. And so that's some of the stuff that we have a hard time swallowing when we were above the state average in all those other areas, but we still become a C. And so I know that's frustrating to a staff for all the stuff that the initiatives that they have, they get above the stuff and then they still get a C. And so anyway, I do want to commend Mr. Rainwater and his staff. Not a true reflection of the grade, and so the same with the high school and some of the stuff that they did as well with their post-secondary and working with this ELL students. So that gets me to the last thing. I'm not going to go over all these. Those are the 5A comps. And so what I did was the first 32 schools are 6A. I took the next 32, which are 5A ADM comps. And so those are schools that are close to us in size. A lot of those are socioeconomically the same. And so if you can look down to the very bottom, it says the high school breakdown. There was 0 A's, 6 B's, 15 C's, 9 D's, and 0 F's. If you count, that was 30 schools. There was not a score for Santa Fe South, and then there was one private school, Bishop Kelly. And so that can show you where that bell curve, if we have 30 schools and there's no A's, there's no F's, it just shows where, everything went in with that bell curve. So junior high breakdown was a little bit harder to figure. Some of the inner city schools, you had to really know and dig in to see if there was a middle school tied to them. I did the best that I could. There was 0 A's, 6 B's, 11 C's, 8 D's, and 2 F's with the junior high breakdown that I was able to pull scores from. So that gets me. Is there any more questions on the secondary report card?
I'll reserve my comments until we finish the other part of the presentation.
Well, I'm going to go sit down and turn it over to Ms. Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Rogel. All right, we're going to switch it to elementary gear. Okay, we're going to start with guests, and I will say initially when I saw this, I was very pleased. I know a lot of the initiative that Mrs. Davison and her staff have done, and I think that we're finally starting to see some of the fruits of the labor kind of kicking in here. Academic achievement, you can see that we're at a 43, the state's at a 52, but I really want you to look at that academic growth. We preach and we preach as a district that we don't have a lot of control of how these kids come to us. Wherever their learning curve is, that's how they come to us. So if we can grow them, that is our goal. And when you look at the state average of growing academically, and it's 50%, and we're growing 62%, 12% above the state average, what we're doing is working. And so this has taken some years to get going, but what they're doing, what the feeder elementary schools are doing to get there, very proud of that. So I want to commend Ms. Davis and her staff, and then also the other elementary schools, because they feed into that as well. So that was a fantastic job. The English language proficiency, just like we talked about, really close. You've got 32% for guests, and then the state average is 33%. We keep talking about, we keep adding with the English learners. We're starting those numbers keep going up, and we've put a lot of money into translation services and other things that can help us, and that is starting to pay off. We're utilizing that, and we're getting a lot of things. And you'll hear me talk as we go through. We've already met as elementary principals. We even met today. We have a way on all their school report cards. I can go in and we can click on English language proficiency, and I can see every kid that's on there, how many years they need to make their goal, and I can print that, and we already have those, and we have figured out the principals are actually bringing with them tomorrow. Basically, if they're not at their school site, what elementary site are they at? And then their ELAPs, which are basically like their English learner, kind of like IEPs, where we help track them and help them with their progress. We were pulling all of those. We're going to indicate that they were on the school report card. They did not meet their academic growth. And then we're going to get their parents in here. We're going to use the translation services that we have, and we're going to get that going. We're going to do the same thing for chronic absenteeism. Very, very close to the state average. You can see we're at 83%. They're at 86%. I can do the same thing. We can go in. We can click on that. All of the kids and their absences. And not only, when we're meeting with them to bring it to their attention that they are chronically absent according to the state of Oklahoma, but also it is an initiative with our district attorney, and also with Compulsory School Act, you have to be in school. And so we're going to work with those families, but that needs to be brought to their attention on how we can work on this. And so those are things that we have in place. Any questions on guests? Okay. Overall grade, 47%, state average of 55%, and that gives us a total grade of a C for guests. Moving on to Fogarty. When we get to Fogarty, Conroe, and Central, it's a little bit confusing because you don't have growth to measure. Third grade is the first year that they take a test. And so when you see academic growth for Fogarty and it says NA, well, they didn't take a test before third grade, so you have no growth comparison to compare that to. When you look at their academic achievement, that is their math and reading, 21%. Yeah, we want that a little bit higher. We talk about their first year test takers. And again, we do the same thing with those, that 21%. We go in, we click on those kids, okay, here's what they scored, how many points are they to get to the next level that they need to be, what school are they at, and we have that information. This part of the school report card is helpful because you can go in and have those conversations. So the principals are digging deep, and I think, we talked for the longest time of, some of when we were grade center, it really didn't kind of hit home to maybe some of the teachers and staff that were second grade and below because they didn't really deal with it. And now with going in, looking at all this stuff, they're really starting to kind of be a little more part of the whole plan and kind of see things. And so it's nice to see everyone, and obviously the more hands on deck, the better. So we're starting to see a better overall kind of buy-in on that. So again, no academic growth. English language proficiency, you're going to see lower numbers for these lower grades because they haven't had really enough time to get improved yet. Some of them have just been put on there, or some of them have only had 1 year. And so you're not going to see a huge percentage in that area, and that's why you see the F in that area for Fogarty. They had a lot coming in and not enough time to really get that growth on them. And so the state average is 33, we're at 16. Again, chronic absenteeism, we're right there with the state average for Fogarty. I think we're 86.43 and they're 0.51. Fogarty overall grade, really don't have one because basically we don't have the growth mechanism. They can't receive a report card because the growth mechanism is a part of that. And so they don't have either the 75-point scale or the 90-point scale. Have to have that growth in there. Any questions on Fogarty?
When you speak about a program, you go in and click and know where the kids, is this a new program that we just implemented?
No, it's always been on any type of state testing when you can go in and on any of the report cards, you can go in and see the achievement of what subgroups or what groups. You've always had the ability to kind of be able to go in and do that. Good question. Okay, moving on to Central. A couple of NAs there. Academic achievement, they were first grade, so they don't take any of the state tests. Again, no academic growth. They didn't take a test in kindergarten, so nothing to compare it to. Extremely was Central because the first time they could have even been identified as an English language proficiency student would be in kindergarten. That's the first time they could take the WIDA test, which is that English language instruction test. And so you're going to see a smaller percentage there because they're just being identified in that. So they're at 15%. State average is 33%. I will say kudos to Central. They are higher than the state average on chronic absenteeism. They are at an 87. The state is at an 86. And I think Mrs. Watson can tell you that we were talking today and we were clicking on those very thrilled kids and getting out some things and figuring out what school that they were at. So again, kudos to you on that absenteeism. I'm with Mr. Ogle on that. Don't necessarily agree with a lot of that, but I think all of our initiatives that we have and now having the ability to go in there, I think it's going to hit home. I mean, when it's a district attorney initiative, when it's a state law, and then, I'm sorry, but your state, you've been reporting that your child is chronically absent according to the state of Oklahoma. I don't know what else needs to be said at that point. Questions on Central?
So all these sites, we can't really compare this to next year because this is when they were all signed.
Yeah, this will look much different next year because you'll be able to track the growth.
It'll look just like the Justice next year.
Okay.
And so it'll make much more sense.
It just, with the grade centers the way we were, it just didn't fit the model that the state had for reporting on this.
Again, Central doesn't have an overall grade. They don't have the pieces to the component to get that. Any questions on anything with Central? Okay, Cotterell, again, you're not going to have any growth or achievement. They did not have any English language people that were there, and if they did, they were the first year, and they wouldn't have been identified until that first grade year and shown up on what would have been Danny's. Chronic absenteeism, you got 81% compared to 86%. Mr. Graham and I talked a lot about that. Is some of the younger grades, sometimes the mentality is, does my child have to be here every day for kindergarten? Does my child have to be here every day? And yes, they do. And so I think that this kind of helps kind of plug that in, and I guarantee you those elementary principals know those kids and how many days they missed, and I guarantee you they know that data. Any questions on anything with Cotterell? But that's why you have that lower number, because they think it's just, oh, they're just in kindergarten, it's okay, and, you know, that's kind of what you end with. So again, no overall grade for Cotterell on that one. It was a little bit harder getting comparisons with Guess because there's not a lot of 4th, 5th, and 6th grade centers, but I was able to pull a couple that were either 4th and 5th or 5th and 6th grade, and of that comparison, there were none of them that had A's. You had 2 schools that had B's, and that was a Deer Creek Intermediate and Piedmont. You had 7 schools that had C's. We were one of the 7. El Reno, Coweta, Durant, McAllister, Noble, and Ada. And then you had 2 D's, which were Diamond and Woodward, and then no F's. Again, there's that bell curve with the no A's and no F's. And so I know I was working with Mrs. Haw today, and we were going in and we were looking at some things, and we were just looking for just a simple scale of what you needed. And I said, well, no, you can't do that. And so then we pulled up, and there was this math formula, and she said, you have to do this formula to get to this? And I said, yes. And there was like tabs and instructions on how to do that. And so it's a little different this year, but we're working hard. We know it. We're on it, and I think we'll be prepared for what comes our way. Questions on the end of elementary?
You gotta click the next one. There you go.
Doug did make a few slides, and I would like to recognize him for that. I apologize.
Now I know what you're spending the time.
There you go.
That's what he did.
He wanted to make you smile. There you go.
I like that.
Okay, thank you.
You know, my thoughts on all this, and I shared with the press release and on social media about it. And, you know, since we started this testing odyssey that we've and fallen in love with testing, which parts of it are very useful, but parts of it can be very misleading. We have tried as a district to focus around growth that is bounded by the state averages. And I think there's some of that in this. I've never been a fan of the bell curve. As a teacher, I never use the bell curve in my classroom. It predisposes someone to A's and predisposes someone to F's, regardless of their score. And I was in a meeting where this topic came up in a room full of superintendents, and a scenario was presented that I had not even considered. We have in our state enterprise schools and magnet schools. The enterprise schools are typically elementaries that people can apply for their children to be in, and they are public schools. Oklahoma City Public Schools has enterprise schools. We all know of magnet schools, either in Oklahoma City Public Schools or in Tulsa Public Schools, and where families make application and there's an admission process. Those schools are all included in this. And those schools, when they get an A, largely because they were able to select their student population. What happens to the next school that's on the border of an A or a B? And the next school that's on the border of a B or a C? That is why I'm not a fan of the bell curve, among other reasons. Then, looking at ourselves. Obviously, we don't want a 73% graduation rate. We want something better. We want improvement, and we're going to continue to strive toward improvement. But one of the things, as I alluded to in my comments earlier when this first came out, if you look at the chronic absenteeism, and as a more experienced educator than I'd like to be sometimes, you look at that and you realize the chronic absenteeism, when you dig into those students' lives, they are in many cases predisposed to not being a high school graduate. And so these habits are formed early. And that's why we have been working very hard with our district attorney to work on the chronic absenteeism, change the behavior before they get to Guthrie High School so that they're not a dropout. And I think that's what we have to continue to strive to. And that is a community thing. Getting your kids to school is a community thing. And I don't think there's any way that you can say chronic absenteeism and graduation do not go hand in hand. And so that is something as a community we need to work on. And it's going to take more than just the principals meeting with parents. It's going to take more than just the district attorney filing charges. It's going to take a community working together. And so that's where looking at all of this, as I said in my remarks right after these came out, there are some bright spots. The growth at Guess, the work at the junior high, that's a sign of good things. And we know from our state testing, from our third grade reading as a decent indicator, from third grade until sixth grade, we're doing a great job of growing those kids academically. And we need to continue that momentum, but we also, along the road, we can't teach them if they're not in school. And so those are my thoughts on all of this. This is one piece to the puzzle that we use to try and dictate what we do in the classroom. It's not the whole piece, and I can assure you we are, I know every principal wants better for their kids than what they have right now, and they're working on it. And this maybe is a way to examine the resources that were provided and look at, do we need to shuffle that a little bit to some areas that maybe need more resources as well. So,
I've got a question, Mr. LeGrand. Do you feel like your teachers, when they do take kids out on activities, that list gets complete? Because just from experience, I know that there's been times when the boys and I would travel to show sheep out of state, and we might be the only one. You know, we'd have to call back in and say, you know, we're traveling, even though the ag teachers didn't go with us. Do you feel like that there could be a few of these absences in here that are counting that really shouldn't, because of the list from the teachers to excuse that child?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. We've done a lot better job the last couple of years. In fact, we've even found that Career Tech allows a lot more of these ag contests to actually be considered state qualifiers that do not count against their activity, because they're really only supposed to be gone 10 days a year for activities, and you can appeal for up to 5 more. But if it's a state qualifying event like regionals and state, that's not included in that number of 10. And so we've actually cleaned up a lot of those activities that were counting against some of those ag kids because they were actually state qualified events. So
So you feel like your teachers do provide you with an accurate list when they do
Yes.
to go to those state and national qualifying
it's much
things?
better.
Okay.
It's been really good the last year and a half.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion? We'll move to agenda item 11, the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve?
Mr. President, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Davis.
Yes.
Watts.
Yes.
Smedley.
Yes.
Pearson.
Yes.
Flagg.
Yes.
Bennett Johnson.
Yes.
Sallee.
Yes.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
Agenda item 12A, recommendation, consideration, and action upon contract renewal with Municipal Accounting Systems, Inc. for providing software and support for financial accounting, personnel, child nutrition, and student information programs, including student grade books.
This is an annual renewal with the software vendor that we utilize for all of these services. Recommend approval.
I move we approve the contract with Municipal Accounting Systems, Inc.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Davis.
Yes.
Watts.
Yes.
Smedley.
Yes.
Pearson.
Yes.
Flagg.
Yes.
Bennett Johnson.
Yes.
Sallee.
Yes.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
Agenda item 12B, recommendation, consideration, action upon request for special education students to attend State Special Olympics Summer Games, May 15th through the 17th.
This is an annual item that we bring for board approval and consideration for our Special Olympians to attend the games in Stillwater. Recommend approval.
I make a motion that we approve the request for special education students to attend State Special Olympics Summer Games, May 15th through the 17th, 2019.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Davis.
Yes.
Watts.
Yes.
Smedley.
Yes.
Pearson.
Yes.
Flagg.
Yes.
Bennett Johnson.
Yes.
Sallee.
Yes.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
Agenda item 12C, recommendation, consideration, and action upon K through 8 remedial summer school program.
We are required annually to get approval from the board to continue this summer school program. It's paid for through title funds and recommend approval.
I make a motion we approve the K through 8 remedial summer school program.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Davis.
Yes.
Watts.
Yes.
Smedley.
Yes.
Pearson.
Yes.
Flagg.
Yes.
Bennett Johnson.
Yes.
Sallee.
Yes.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
Agenda item 13 is a proposed executive session for the purpose of discussing employment of personnel, FMLA request, resignation, separation from employment, and transfer of position request. All is set out on the personnel reports. Discussion of extra duty assignments as listed for 2018 to 2019. Discussion of all building level administrators' contracts as listed for 2019 to 2020. And periodic annual evaluation in terms of employment of Dr. Michael Simpson, Superintendent of Schools, disclosure of which information would violate the confidentiality requirements of state and/or federal law, all pursuant to 25 Oklahoma Statute, Section 307B1 and 7. We have a motion to,
I make a motion that we go into executive session.
Second.
roll call, please.
Davis.
Yes.
Watts.
Yes.
Smedley.
Yes.
Pearson.
Yes.
Flagg.
Yes.
Bennett Johnson.
Yes.
Sallee.
Yes.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
Okay, it's time to acknowledge the board's return to open session. Only items in Agenda 13 were discussed in executive session and no votes were taken. This shall constitute the executive session minutes. So agenda item 14, vote on action is set out on the personnel reports. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion that we accept the action that was set out on the personnel reports.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Davis.
Yes.
Watts.
Yes.
Smedley.
Yes.
Pearson.
Yes.
Flagg.
Yes.
Bennett Johnson.
Yes.
Sallee.
Yes.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
Agenda item 15, action upon recommendation of extra duty assignments as listed for 2018 to 2019.
I make a motion we approve the extra duty assignments for 2018-2019 as listed.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Davis.
Yes.
Watts.
Yes.
Smedley.
Yes.
Pearson.
Yes.
Flagg.
Yes.
Bennett Johnson.
Yes.
Sallee.
Yes.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
Agenda item 16, recommendation, consideration, action upon building level administrators' contracts as listed for 2019 to 2020 without specification for salary or assignment. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the building level administrators' contracts as listed for 2019-2020 without specification for salary or assignment.
Second. Oh.
Roll call, please.
Davis.
Yes.
Watts.
Yes.
Medley.
Yes.
Pearson.
Yes.
Flagg.
Yes.
Bennett Johnson.
Yes.
Khalid.
Yes.
7 ayes, 0 nays.
Agenda item 17, recommendation, consideration, action to accept any resignations offered since the posting of the agenda.
We have none.
Agenda item 18, discussion and possible action on new business not known about or could not have been reasonably foreseen at the time of the agenda posting.
We have none.
We have a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, I move we adjourn. We both
Second.
do.
Second.
Roll call.
Davis.
Yes.
Watts.
Yes.
Medley.
Yes.
Pearson.
Yes.
Flagg.
Yes.
Bennett Johnson.
Yes.
Khalid.
Yes.
7 ayes, 0 nays.